be about 20 minutes. Right, thank you. We know that we're recording. And there'll be time for questions afterwards. So if you want to ask a question, I'm sure you're all used to Zoom by now. Click on the chat and write your question in, or else raise your hands, or else put in your, I like these little reaction things when you can put in your things and say what you want to do. If you want to raise your hand or whatever. Right, now the first person who is going to speak to us is Phil Brennan, who's here, who arrived early, from WCEN Energy. Now, I hadn't heard of WCEN Energy before this meeting was set up, so I'm sure you're going to tell us all about it and how you're promoting relationships between community energy groups and local authorities. I looked you up. You've got 117 members, but they don't include Wiltshire, they don't include Dorset, and they don't include Somerset, though they do include Bath and Bristol and Cheltenham and other places. So thank you very much for helping us. Phil, would you like to start your presentation?
And Phil's got a colleague, Charlotte, who's going to share the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Pete.
Right, yeah, thank you very much, Leslie, and thanks for the invitation to speak. Just by way of introduction, my name's Phil Brennan. I'm head of WCEN Energy. If you haven't heard of WCEN, it doesn't surprise me. We're not particularly well known, but it stands for the Association for Public Service Excellence, and we are a local government only membership organisation. So without councils being members of ours, we will solely with what they and climate change, but across all local authority services. We're not for profit, so we haven't got a profit motive. We haven't got any dividends to give out at the end of the year. And as I say, we're here as part of the local government sector, really. This is a kind of a dual presentation. Charlotte's going to do the first bit. And the second is something that I'm going to talk about, which is more about kind of priorities and assets. So if you want to start us off, Charlotte.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So as we said, I'm just going to provide a little bit of an overview of WCEN Energy, so highlighting how we're supporting local authorities to develop and deliver municipal energy schemes and projects. So some of it Phil has actually already covered, but just quickly, just about what WCEN is. We go into the WCEN Energy side. So as we said, WCEN is a not-for-profit organisation, UK-wide organisation, so we have members in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales as well. And we have around 250 members of sort of the main WCEN scheme, but we work with others through like training and consultancy as well who aren't members, so we have sort of connections with almost all the local authorities in the UK. We cover lots of services that council deliver, so building, cleaning, catering, refuse, sports and leisure, transport, etc. Initially set up to be predominantly frontline service focused, but has sort of developed into other services as well. So as well as sort of the main core delivery of WCEN, we also actually has a training arm, so delivering training for officers and councillors. We also have a service benchmarking section called Performance Networks, which basically helps sort of similar councils to compare services and costs of collecting a bin, for example, and sort of figure out how come it's costing us 3p more than the council next to us to empty bins, and how can we streamline that service and make it cheaper. And we also have a separate consultancy service as well. So part of that group is us, which is WCEN Energy. So we were set up, the WCEN Energy part set up in 2014. And as I said at the beginning, we have around 120 members. The main idea behind WCEN Energy simply really is that all local authorities have assets to help address the climate change agenda. And many local authorities have similar problems, so needing to tackle fuel poverty, climate change, air quality, etc. And they can use those assets, the assets that they have, to help address those priorities. But many local authorities struggle with the capacity to reach those aims. So we're sort of here to help bridge that gap and help them turn those assets into helping to address the similar issues that they have. And in our experience over the last few years, capacity in councils has obviously been reduced due to austerity, losing staff numbers, etc. but the issues and opportunities remain and actually are growing more than ever. So in order to help councils with that challenge, we have sort of 4 main areas of service delivery. So they are advocacy, knowledge, learning and consultancy. So I'm just going to go over what those 4 sort of mean and what it means in practice. So in terms of our advocacy role, the idea is that we're promoting the role that councils have in this agenda within the sector, so promoting sort of the great work that councils are doing to other councils, but also promoting it further than the sector and wider than the sector, so to government departments and also in the private sector as well. So we sit on a local energy group with BEIS, so sort of helping to advise BEIS on the issues that councils are facing. We respond to government consultations that are relevant to local authority energy, try and keep up to date with policy, which is difficult at the moment. There's new strategies, new plans. Obviously, you've seen the announcements yesterday about the net zero strategy, the heat and building strategy, so plenty going on to keep us busy there. And we also have some approved partners, so private sector companies, like heat pump companies, for example, help council companies that help to install electric vehicle charge points, and they're sort of like trusted members of ours that we've checked out and sort of worked with, and we can then put those in front of our local authority audience as well. In terms of knowledge, this one's fairly straightforward, but helping to pass on knowledge to our members. So we do briefing, so take a bigger policy document into a 5 or 6 page briefing, pulling out the main points and highlighting how they're relevant to local authorities. We also have research and publications. I'll go through those in a bit more depth in a minute, but they're sort of bigger documents with much more in-depth sort of knowledge and information. And they're either written by us or written by our consultants. We also have a network query service, which is basically an opportunity for officers and councils to submit questions that they might have. So they'll submit a question to us, so has another local authority, had issues with X, Y, or Z, and then we can then publish that question to our membership, gather all of the responses, and then we send everybody who's responded and the person who's asked the question a set of responses, so they can just sort of gauge what else is going on in the sector and how other local authorities have solved problems that they might be facing in their council. We also have monthly newsletters and sort of state of the market surveys or surveys about a particular issue that comes up that we want to do a bit more in-depth research into. So we'll survey the membership, then turn it into a publication and then issue it to the membership as well. So the learning side is all of our events. So we have webinars and in-person events. So these are either on a specific technology, so we could do a webinar or an event around heat networks, for example, get a few speakers along to talk about heat network. It could also be on a specific issue, or they could also be focused on a specific council themselves. So we've done sort of a day highlighting all the work that Nottingham are doing or Warrington are doing. We also have our Big Energy Summit and our Scottish Energy Summit. So they are both 2-day events, annual 2-day events, and they are workshops, speakers, basically an opportunity to collaborate, share ideas across the sector. They include like a dinner in the evening and staying over and stuff. So lots of opportunities for networking at our Big Energy Summit and our Scottish Energy Summit. And finally, the consultancy side is much more sort of bespoke help and support. So this can range from 1 or 2 days of consultancy support right through to full project build out of a solar farm, which could take months. So it's very much dependent on what councils need and want. Obviously, you can see some of the technology on the side there. We do a lot around helping with solar farms, do a lot around energy audits, you can do heat network stuff, a variety of sort of technologies there. And again, it's just sort of based on the help and support that council might need. We've helped a few of them with climate emergency action plans, for example. So this is just a few photos of some of our research publications. So as you can see, some of them are quite specific about, eco funding for local authorities is quite a specific issue. Or we've got Energy Across the Authority, which is more of a case study publication, which is a bit more generalised. This one is a few years old now, actually, but we produced this one around the start of the climate emergency movement and councils starting to declare climate emergencies. And essentially what we wanted to do is pull together some of the information and tools that councils could use when declaring a climate emergency, highlighting some of the benefits, risks of doing so, and helping with some ideas around how to develop an action plan and those sort of early stages of developing an action plan. And we highlighted a few case study examples of some councils who had already declared a climate emergency and come up with a plan, so that other councils could sort of take some ideas out of those. Energy Policy Authority, so just spoke about that, but this one is our most recent publication, so we published this in September, so only a few weeks ago. And this one is a case study publication, so there are 8 case studies from different local authorities across the UK. In this one specifically, there's one around climate emergency action plans, one around an EV charging hub, solar farms, district heating, and a few more as well. And this is essentially just 2 pages of A4 about each project and each council, describing some of the issues that they've come across with the project, the benefits of the project, some of the costing, like just some of the sort of main learning points and stuff as well. Again, so that other councils can pick up the document, have a look through, think, oh, actually, yeah, that might work in our area, and then sort of copy some of that work and help to sort of spread the agenda further across the UK. So finally, obviously Phil's going to sort of go into a bit more detail about some of these areas now, but at the moment our predominant focus with WCEN is helping councils to identify renewable energy opportunities, so looking at their assets, so looking at the land that they have, the buildings, car parks, vehicles, etc., and how they can turn those assets into a renewable energy opportunity. Also helping with implementing strategies around sustainability, climate change, and energy, and also around planning as well, doing quite a lot of sort of more newer work around sort of helping to embed climate change into councils' local plans. Helping to conduct asset reviews, so looking at boiler performance or something quite specific, all the way up to energy audits of the entire estate, validating electricity bills that councils are paying, etc. So that's sort of looking more about getting assets in order. And also been helping lots of councils with developing carbon footprints, coming up with a baseline, and then a emissions reduction trajectory all the way up to a net zero target. So that's sort of the main overview, I guess, of what we do. And as I said, Phil's going to go into a little bit more detail now about some of those points that I've already brought up.
Leslie, you're
Right,
muted.
thanks, Charlotte.
Right. Thank you. Oh, good. Okay.
I still okay. I've unmuted myself. So I'm taking it for granted you can hear me.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
we can
think
hear you.
there's a bit of vibration, Phil. Maybe if you speak a bit closer to the microphone, there's a bit of echoing, I think. On my
Okay. How's that? Any better?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, it's only when you hear that kind of list of what Charlotte's been through there that you realise what the breadth of support is. I think that we can offer, but more importantly, the councils need. And I think it comes back to what Charlotte said there in terms of capacity. So I'm just gonna highlight a few issues. I haven't got any slides. I'm just going to highlight a few issues really that have come up and that we've experienced. And this issue of capacity is going to raise itself on a number of occasions. So really, the first thing to say is that clearly councils have been looking at this agenda for a long time. No doubt you've been interacting with them for a long time too. It's not as if we're starting from a blank sheet of paper here, really, with the prompt that has hit the newspapers, which is essentially climate emergency declarations. Things have been going on for a long time before that. Whether that is somebody doing energy efficiency work at the civic centre, or working with you guys, or looking at what their investments are. Going back to the time of councils having a local agenda 21 officer, which you might be aware of, right through them to a number of them now identifying specific officers to look to manage a climate emergency action plan. I think that those climate emergency declarations have been a big boost for who want to, well, they were all declared in the best way. Certainly, I'm sure some of them were a case of, well, the council next door's got one of these declarations, therefore we better have one. Without much chat between the councillors and the officers, I'm sure that's the case in some cases. But still, you know, we are where we are, and we've got to deal with it. Some of the main distinctions have been between those councils who've said the declaration refers to their own operations as opposed to the whole area. Now, obviously, it's a huge undertaking to get a whole area to be carbon neutral by a certain date. You know, super ambitious, really, and pretty much impossible, I'd say. It's enough of a job for a big organisation to make itself carbon neutral. So I think you know, the capacity issue comes up simply because it's not or hasn't been regular daily activity. You know, it's not like running an environmental health service. It's not like doing repairs to council properties. It's something that kind of didn't come out of the blue, but certainly the focus on it is much more than it has been before. And I think that's why there's been a need for our services, which is growing on the basis that Charlotte that we're looking at you know, the duty lies with Mr., not with any individual or local authority. So there's a lot of variety in how councils want to address these topics. The whole term around an emergency, you know, can be interpreted in different ways. And for some councils, it's far more of an emergency than for others. As you'll know, you know, we still get calls from councils who say, we don't know what our carbon footprint is. Can you help us produce it? That's at one end of the scale. At the other end of the scale, you've got those councils who are considered, you know, at the vanguard really of the agenda. Bristol's, Nottingham's, Glasgow's, big cities normally. We've got a lot of capacity to go at this topic, and the whole emergency language kind of has been taken over as well. You know, we've heard about climate emergency declarations as a climate emergency. You know, the next minute the terminology was applied to high street emergency, air quality emergency, social care emergency. You know, so it kind of gets lost a little bit. Really, the impetus gets lost a little bit, but still, it's still a priority. And then, you know, however you want to look at priorities and emergencies, finance nearly always trumps everything else. So it's very difficult at a local authority to get anything past the finance director unless they are convinced that it's something that's going to be of equal benefit as the financial prerogative is. So that's a tough one. Now, in terms of an example, needless to say, we go into a lot of leisure centres because of the work we do, and you will probably know that if you go into your local leisure centre and go to a vending machine, you'll see bottles of water, single-use plastic bottles of water for sale through the vending machine, and it's a, you know, it's and that council may well have a climate emergency declared, and you wonder how those two things marry up, and obviously clearly they don't. If anybody takes 2 seconds to think about it, they don't marry up. But the reason for that being there, for those bottles of water being there, is because the leisure centre manager has got a financial budget to meet. Every quarter they've got to generate a certain amount of income, and that's an easy way of doing it. And of course they haven't thought about an alternative way of doing it, because that's not the way that they normally approach this type of thing. You know, they're not experts in climate, the same way that somebody else in the council is a career highways engineer, or a career you know, lawyer, whatever it might be. So the biggest job for a lot of people who have got responsibilities in local authorities is to educate those people who aren't experienced in this agenda. And of course, all those people, whether you manage a leisure centre or whatever you do, they have got to have a contribution to what the corporate centre is doing, what the council is doing into this action plan. But they can't do that unless they're informed in some way. So, you know, you might have heard of something called carbon literacy training. That's just one way of doing it, of informing people. That, you know, you could hold workshops, you could have you know, internal web tools to get people up to date with this agenda, and just generally to get them thinking about those things that they wouldn't normally consider. Now, clearly, you know, community energy comes into that category. Councils that you approach, that you get on far better with than others, simply because they understand what you're doing, they're open to working with you guys, and they see the joint benefits, and others don't, because they haven't got that far yet. So, you know, this whole idea of education, of educating and informing people is crucial, really. So I read yesterday that there's a survey of electric vehicle drivers found that over a quarter of them charge their vehicles at peak rates and miss out on a potential saving of about £360 a year because of when they charge. Now, I appreciate that it might not be a green consideration, and if you can afford it, you can afford it, that's fine. But I would have thought it's a normal thing for people to look to maximise the benefit of their electric vehicle, and yet still a quarter of them are charging at a peak time. And those are people who you would expect to be on the game. You know, they understand why they've got an electric vehicle, they know the benefits of it, and yet they're not getting the best financial outcome. And those are people who know what they're talking about, you know, and it's hard to get to them, or some of them. You can imagine how hard it is to get to people who aren't necessarily informed about this agenda. Charlotte mentioned there about assets and information, and that's something that we talk about all the time. If you go into a local council and say to them, you know, what do you mean by your assets? They'll come up with the usual things: land, buildings, the fleet. Obviously, if you prompt them a bit more, you might get staff being an asset out of them, their partners, their influence. These are all things that councils have got assets, have got in terms of an asset. Some, I don't know whether you know much about what Warrington Council are doing. They've got a couple of invested in a couple of solar farms outside of their area. So obviously for them, an asset isn't necessarily something within their boundary. They've also got solar. They put solar on top of a large logistics building within their authority, but it doesn't belong to the council. So, you know, again, an asset doesn't necessarily have to belong to them in this case. So they are thinking of things a little bit differently. And of course, you know, as well as understanding what your assets are, you need information about what condition they're in. You know, what have you got an asset management plan? What's your investment plan for them in the future? The fleet replacement, all that information that you need for your assets. Now, the reason it's become more important, it's historically important, but the reason it's become more important is because funding streams, especially BEIS, and you'll know about the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, the public sector decarbonisation scheme, the bidding into the amount of money councils aren't. A lot, you know, for the obvious reason that it's not as much of a priority or an emergency in some places as it should be. And that's down to austerity, it's down to capacity, whatever. Again, that's where we are. But that is the kind of information that you need in order to make sure that you're getting the most out of your assets. It is hard to justify spending money on things when you don't know that you're going to get anything back from them. So you could have a scheme on the shelf. You know, we want to invest in this particular civic centre. We know that we can invest in the fabric and the heating and change the lighting, for example. We're waiting for the next to come on before spending the time on it.
Phil?
Charlotte mentioned the, yeah.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit there towards the end. I'm not sure whether it's my connection or yours, but I just wonder if you wind up in a couple of minutes and then...
Yeah, just on the last point.
Okay, cool.
Just on the last point, which is that I had a briefing session with Hayes yesterday on the net zero strategy, and they kind of identified three main issues from that. One, which is leadership from there. So bays are going to be identified as the main point of contact, the single point of contact for this whole agenda. And they made a point about identifying more clearly the role of community energy and local authorities within that document. I don't know whether you had a chance to look at it. Secondly, they talked about resources and said there are no figures in there yet, apart from some specific funding streams. There are no overall figures yet, and that might take a good few months for BEIS to identify or to allocate the funding that comes out of the comprehensive spending review in a week's time. And the third thing they said was around strengthening local authority capacity. So those are the kind of three messages from it. And really, I think, you know, again, that's the generic scale, and in order to see actions on the ground, and of course it's the actions on the ground, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it in terms of duties or responsibilities for local authorities. At the moment they weren't talking about that, but I think you know, at some point that's got to come out. That's got to come at some point further down the line. Okay, happy to wrap up and answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks. Well, I can see Brian Matthews got his hand up already. Brian, have you got a question? Or is Brian?
Thank you. Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Phil, for your presentation. I think we probably got most of it. The journey that many councils have been through on the climate emergency is different, of course. And in Wiltshire's case, I'm a Wiltshire councillor. It was an interesting one. I mean, I wrote the motion based on Bristol's motion, actually, but turning it into a motion for a rural area, and we came up with a plan of what we thought would work. And on the day, we got it through basically because we managed to touch enough hearts that they realised that they really should be voting for it. That said, of course, Wiltshire is Conservative dominated, and it is continuing to be a struggle. And yesterday we were defeated on another related motion. Having said that, the struggle continues. I can see from what you've been saying, you obviously offer a really valuable service to local government. I would personally like to know more about it. I haven't heard of you before, but I've been a councillor for 4 years or whatever. I mean, just for an example, looking at good advice on how one turns, how one charges vehicles. So many questions related to green energy and of course community energy. So it would be very useful if you could share the presentations with us, and also if you could give us an idea of what it costs to be a member of the Association for Public Service Excellence, because if I'm going to put the case to my council, I need to know that sort of information.
Thanks, Brian. And I was going to supplement that. Can we, community energy groups, can we access the information you've got? Do you have to join? Do you have to pay? Phil, can you answer us?
So, well, we're a local government organisation.
Finding it very difficult to hear, Phil.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, if you speak.
Ah, right. Okay. Yes, we are. We're a local government association, so that they are our primary members. But we do have an associate link, if you like, for organisations like community energy organisations. So yes, that's an option. In terms of local authority membership fees, it costs £2,200 a year to be a member, and that covers everybody who, whether you're a councillor or an officer within the local authority, everyone can access the services. And that is if the council is an existing APSI member. So there's a kind of there's a fee to be a member of APSI, and the APSI Energy is a bespoke service. I can certainly send details through to Pete about that if you want me to, Pete, and you can circulate it. You can circulate details to everybody on the list.
Excellent. Thank you. We've got another question from Richard. No.
Yeah, I was sort of like slightly disheartened to hear you say, Phil, that it's impossible for local authorities to reach their declared carbon neutral or net zero goals for their areas. Is it really impossible, or is it just are local authorities just wriggling out of what they've declared by saying, oh well, it's out of our hands, we don't have any control or authority to do any more than we can with our own estate? I mean, clearly that's just not going to be enough, but surely there's got to be a way to cut through this, Phil, and you've got experience across lots of local authorities who are doing rather better than, in our case, Wiltshire.
Okay. Well, yeah, there is the distinction there between the council's own operations and the emissions that are produced on the back of that, compared with those of everybody else and all those other organisations within, let's say, Wiltshire. So, as an example, we had figures from a large council north of England, which is a unitary council. So it's bigger than a borough or a district, but it's not a county council. It's not a municipal or city council. Sorry, it's not a metropolitan or city council. So, but anyway, they're talking about £100 million being their estimate of the cost for their local authority to become carbon neutral, and that is 3%, or they estimate that they produce 3% of the emissions in their area. Now, I think that's quite high. The work that we've done looks at a lot of councils producing between 1% and 2%. So that's a bit of an issue around scale. The other issue is control and influence. And, I would say that for a local authority to be able to get to everyone and get them to act and spend and understand to become carbon neutral by, let's say 2030, and some councils have set that date, is pretty much impossible. You know, especially as we stand at the moment, you know, it's great that the government turn around and say, oh, you know, we're going to get you out of internal combustion engines. You've got to have, you know, gas boilers aren't going to be available in new properties. But, you know, clearly that needs to be much more dramatic if we're going to reach targets that are very ambitious. You know, I'm not saying they can't be reached. I'm just saying that the council's influence is limited.
That's very depressing to hear that. We've got one more question from Cara before we move on. Cara?
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, I just
Yeah.
wondered, Phil, to bring it back to our network here, how much engagement or discussion with local authorities have you done around providing renewable energy through community energy organisations?
We haven't done a lot, and one of the reasons for that is again, capacity. So let me give you an example. I was talking to he was a pretty senior officer in a big city, probably about 4 years ago, around community energy, and I said to this particular chap, you know, what level of engagement do you have? And he says none, on the basis that they didn't have the capacity at the local authority side. So part of it is a lack of capacity in some councils. Part of it is, you know, it's not something that we've had a lot of people calling us up for and saying, you know, can you help us get involved with community energy? That said, we're just in the middle of a project with Energy Systems Catapult, and they are producing a toolkit which started off as the idea being to help local authorities to look through, kind of like looking through a checklist of what to do for particular schemes, and we're currently helping them out with a community energy version of that. So that's going to be, I think it's BEIS funded. It comes through the Energy Systems Catapult, and it will be, I should think, within 6 months, the local authority version will be launched, and I suspect quite soon after the community energy version will be launched as well. So that's something that we've been involved with. But in answer to a specific question around community energy involvement, not an awful lot. Again, you know, I can only think that's you know, a reflection of the priority of the local authorities, really.
But also, I guess a lot of them don't really know about what's on their doorstep particularly. So maybe it might be helpful for organisations like you to build strength in that opportunities to network, and also engage with Community Energy England too, which will have also the list of active organisations across the country.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think. Is it Emma, who's based in Sheffield? Community Energy England. Is it Emma?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know Emma, and we have done, or she has been and spoken at a couple of our events. So in terms of promotion, and that's one way of doing it. And you know, we're quite happy to do that promotion, to spread the message, if you like.
Right, thank you. I have got another question from Margaret Paul. Can it be brief? We want to move on to listen to Sonia. I can't hear you too, you're mute.
Hello,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what is BEIS again, please? I missed it.
BEIS is...
Sorry, BEIS is the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department at government.
Okay, business. Sorry again, business.
Energy.
It's the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy.
Thank you.
It's a government department, right? Thank you very much for that, Phil and your colleague.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot of good work, and let's hope we can access you and get our councils involved with you in the future. But now we're going to hear from Sonia, who has already been involved with local councils, particularly Bristol and Devon. I've heard a lot about you, Sonia. You're involved in a lot of things. I'm glad to see you, and I want to hear from you now. So welcome.
Thank you, Leslie, and hello, everybody. Nice to see some old friends and new friends as well. I am just going to share. Oh, hold on. I did a live presentation on Monday for the big solar co-op, and it was very bizarre. I'm quite happy to be back at home on my screen, just working, reminding myself how I share my presentation. Can you see that?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So I'm hopefully going to put a bit more of a positive spin on some of the work that local authorities have been doing with community energy organisations, and I am going to touch on a couple of models that two local authorities have been looking at, ways of buying energy from community groups as well. Just my contact details on there, and a couple of the community energy groups that I'm currently involved with. So you can see I'm coming at this from a legal and a community aspect. For the purposes of today, though, I am a consultant for Bristol City Council and their energy service team, and I'm working very closely with them on some very exciting energy projects, which I will tell you a little bit more about in a minute. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of two local authorities and the work they're doing with community energy groups, and then talk a bit about some recent reports and trials which are ongoing, which will hopefully be of interest and use to you as a community organisation if you're building new renewable energy projects, or indeed have existing renewable energy projects and you wish to sell your electricity or heat. A couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation for the Local Government Association on renewable energy on local authority estates, and in particular how local authorities nationwide can engage more proactively with community energy organisations for a wide range of benefits. And I think this statement that was produced jointly between Community Energy England and the Local Government Association highlights why local authorities should be working with community energy groups, because of the numerous benefits that those projects offer, not just low carbon generation, but economic, social and environmental benefits. And I think a lot of local authorities, and particularly some of those in the Southwest, are really understanding now how those dual benefits of working with community groups can really, really assist in their drive to net zero. So first off, Bristol. Bristol has had a long history with community and working with community energy organisations, and that started probably a bit before 2011, but you can start to see the first work coming through from Bristol City Council with community energy groups, and it won't escape your attention that that is all following the introduction of the feed-in tariff, which was introduced in 2010, when we saw a proliferation of opportunities for community energy organisations to deliver renewable energy, and particularly on local authority assets, for example, schools or community buildings. And Bristol is not short of schools or community energy buildings, and saw an opportunity to work with community groups and launched the first fund for communities to work with them. And we started as a local authority to see the first community energy projects coming through within Bristol. In 2014, we had the community energy strategy. Now, where is that community energy strategy now? But it was introduced by Ed Davey, and it's still there. No one's repealed it. It still exists. and was a real forefront in seeing some government support and some proactive encouragement from central government to local authorities to work with community energy groups. And to that end, Bristol City Council was awarded money from the Department of Energy and Climate Change, as it was then, BEIS now, and was awarded a significant sum of money to be able to distribute to community energy organisations. And that community fund is still ongoing. And from that fund, there's been a large number of community renewables that have been introduced and assisted, and right through to the present date, where Bristol City Council has offered and has leased its land for a community solar farm, and for now the latest community energy project, which is the Ambition Lawrence Western Community Wind Turbine. And one of the well, the main reason I'm working with Bristol City Council at the moment is a very large energy procurement called City Leap. It's a very exciting project. It is designed to put rocket fuel, and that's probably actually a wrong phrase in a climate emergency, isn't it? Not rocket fuel. Designed to, I was going to say turbocharge. I'm going to have to think of a better metaphor to use next time. To kickstart or to really accelerate Bristol's ambition to get to net zero by bringing in private sector investment. And one of my roles within that is to ensure that community energy plays a really strong part in that and is there to deliver renewable energy through this new project and this new partnership that the council is driving. And I'm really proud of how much community energy is going to feature in this when we finally award this contract to our private sector partner next year. There's a lot of words on this slide, and I'm not going to go through them all, but this is just to have an overview of some of the really, really exciting work that Devon County Council is doing at the moment in its programme to work and deliver community energy installations across its estate, but also to look at buying energy back from those community energy installations. And I highlight here a report that Devon County Council have undertaken and commissioned to highlight the economic benefits for local authorities in working with community energy organisations. I mentioned previously how important to see those additional economic benefits are for local authorities, because they can then drive forward projects on their estate if they're able to deliver value for money and a credible social value as well as economic value. And you can see there that for a 30 megawatt solar farm, for a community solar farm, that is, that would generate an additional 15.9 million in economic value to the Devon economy. And that's substantial. And that is a reason why local authorities should be working with community groups in delivery of energy projects. Devon has got a very rich history of community energy and has lots of community energy organisations, and the council has long known the benefits of doing that and has put up a significant amount of community funds and money to help that. But the next stage of what the council, for both Bristol and Devon, that they wanted to do was to work out how they could buy energy from community installations and new renewable energy installations to stimulate the drive of more renewable energy, and also to find a way of decarbonising their own energy use within authorities. And so through that, Devon and the South West Energy Hub looked at a particular type, a model of power purchasing, and commissioned me through Bristol City Council to write a report and review of different types of power purchasing. Now, as community energy organisations, we're really familiar with power purchasing through solar rooftop models, where we sell energy to the building owner, and we've had a long experience of doing that, and also through our larger scale ground mount solar installations, where we enter into traditional power purchasing arrangements with energy suppliers, or if we're lucky, with direct wires from those sites to someone nearby who has a need for that energy. So this report, and I'm putting all the links to these reports at the end of the presentation, so to understand a complex type of power purchasing arrangement called a synthetic power purchase agreement. And it also reviewed the various options, so we could see as a community energy organisation which power purchasing arrangement may suit new renewable energy generation that we were going to be looking at doing. It also provides some precedents and some heads of terms for both looking at a synthetic power purchase arrangement and just a standard power purchasing agreement, because part of the problem with trying to make a return from community energy projects is trying to keep the cost down as low as possible. And if we're getting very expensive legal fees at the start, it's going to take away some of the ability to develop projects. But specifically, Devon wanted to look at how to purchase energy from community energy organisations through this model of a synthetic power purchase agreement. It wanted to ensure through this that it could keep generation and supply localised, and to maximise the social value gain from procuring electricity from community generation projects in the local Devon area. And the same for Bristol in their model that they're looking at as well. And of course, all of that then drives them and their ability to be able to meet net zero targets in their own authority areas. I've mentioned a bit about why this report was commissioned and why Devon and other local authorities are looking at power purchasing as a way of engaging with community energy organisations. Councils, of course, all have to buy electricity and heat and gas from for their own estates, and with what we've seen of power prices recently, authorities are very, very worried about the way costs are going and how they can continue to purchase energy at an affordable rate, but also to keep that supply green, because the quickest thing to do would be to jump to whatever the cheapest energy was in an attempt to save costs. So we have to stick to ensuring we have those additional values coming from the community generation, but also to ensuring that is a wholly renewable energy supply as well. I've mentioned the net zero goals and also maximising local spend. If we're buying energy locally, we're also building and developing and creating employment and local economic benefit. Of course, we're all more than aware that we have no subsidies apart from the CFD regime for small-scale renewable energy generation anymore. So we have to maximise the income and revenue from the generation in order to create that community benefit and to ensure that we can have more renewables. Ability to ensure contribution to local area plans for delivering more renewable energy, and greater governance over the ownership and management of renewable assets. The wonderful thing about community energy projects is that they will stay community energy projects, that they will, through the nature of their organisations, means that when a local authority procures energy from a community energy organisation, it knows for the lifetime of that, the community energy organisation will have an asset lock which will keep that asset in community generation. And so they can maximise the social value for the lifetime of a project. I'm not going to go into great detail about the types of contract, but because I want to get on to having a few minutes on the Bristol model at the moment, but I'll make these slides available afterwards and the report. And it just sets out the different types of contracts that are necessary if you're looking as a community energy organisation to enter into a synthetic power purchase agreement with a local authority. And there are a number of contracts that need to be utilised for synthetic power purchase arrangement, and the financial instrument is the key one of those. It mirrors what we've seen in the subsidy market as a contract for difference, and I did want to call the Bristol one a Bristol contract for difference, but we've called it something else now. But and it mirrors energy pricing through that contract for difference, with the aim of almost being a different subsidy for community energy generation. So there's that financial instrument, and then there are separate power purchase arrangements with the community energy generator, and also, unfortunately, still a licensed supplier who has to be still involved in that mix. as I mentioned, the main arrangement for a synthetic power purchase agreement is a financial instrument. Now, this is quite interesting because the financial instrument, one of the problems, as Phil mentioned before, is local authorities, in order to ensure best value in anything that they're purchasing, have to go through a procurement process, and that can be tortuous, and it can also be a barrier for community energy organisations in getting to that through that procurement, because often there'll be high financial barriers to organisations bidding for things. But the beauty of the financial instrument is that it's not required to be procured by the local authority, because it is a financial instrument and not a service. And so we've put into the report, the synthetic toolkit report for local authorities, how that works and what terms that needs to see, so that it remains a financial instrument and is not subject to public procurement regime. So can't get through a presentation without a picture of a wind turbine. Just couldn't do that to you. And so here is the Bristol City Council's own wind turbine and own solar farm, and I just can't look at those turbines enough to see how much they've been able to help Bristol in its journey to net zero. Not only do they generate 5 megawatts of renewable energy, well, have a capacity to generate 5 megawatts of renewable energy, but also they have delivered through the returns the ability for the council to put more back into the local economy and drive forward their energy transition, just through that sheer volume of feed-in tariff that comes in from those as well. Bristol has instigated quite a large number of renewable energy projects, and is seeking to do a lot more of that, and recently granted planning permission for the Ambition Lawrence Western community turbine, despite the current block of planning for onshore wind turbines. And really, really disappointing to see in the net zero strategy nothing on onshore wind. But anyway, that's a rant for later, perhaps. So to finish, I just wanted to show you one of the projects the Bristol City Council is doing in order to be able to increase renewable energy generation and buy more generation from community renewables and from local renewable energy generators. And this is something which could be emulated by any local authority. It looks complex on this screen, but by setting up the model, the council will be able to share how that's done, and will be able to facilitate other local authorities in setting up a buying facility for local energy generation. So it's what we call the sleeving pool, and it's an innovative way of the council and other potential demand customers getting their electricity and securing their zero carbon electricity supply for both their operations and for their ability to secure new community renewable generation. So this slide shows the outline of the concept with the main parties involved. And in the report that I will highlight on the next page, there is full detail into each of these stages that you can read, and that's publicly available. The structure that has been set up allows the local authority, or indeed any other demand customer, to sign power purchase agreements directly with multiple renewable energy generators and pay them for all the electricity generated from the sites. That's done through a number of contracts, and all of the power exported from the generation sites then comes into what we call the sleeving pool, and then the local authority and other businesses and demand sites can draw from, and they can share that energy that's been delivered to the sleeve pool equally or in agreed merit order. So we can look at sites that are already receiving feed-in tariff or brand new sites and look at the prices that we're paying for energy from those sites. The structure means that we can be fairly dynamic and adding new generation sites over time, and we can also match demand from local authority to that generation. We do have to have a licensed supplier acting as the manager of all that in the middle, and they will undertake all of the balancing for the local authority. Now, we have, Bristol City Council has opened its tender at the moment, but this is a very short-term one initially, to get a supplier involved, and to look at seeking to purchase the energy particularly from the Ambition Lawrence Western turbine. We've drafted and developed all of the power purchase agreements, which will hopefully be available for general use, and the terms and conditions for the supplier. So that will all be publicly available fairly soon. And it's very exciting that that is now open and in the market, and hopefully will deliver a lot more opportunity for community energy to deliver through to selling to local authorities. Those are the resources. I'll put another link. I forgot to put on the one from Devon County Council in relation to the report they've just put out on the social and economic value of community energy generation. But these are the links to the various reports that I've been talking about. And Regen was funded through the MCS scheme, which some community energy groups have been able to gain funding from. To Regen did an analysis of the how effective the Bristol City Council sleeving pool would be, and any barriers to entry on that. So that is the whistle-stop tour of some of the work that I'm doing at the moment, and we've got I think we've got about 6 minutes left. Oh no, we haven't. Sorry, I've overrun, haven't I?
No, sorry. We'll talk it through. Thanks, Sonia. That's really positive, and we like that. By the way, I hope you're all looking at the chat. First of all, Jake's given some links to a presentation that's happening this evening from Devon about the work you've been doing, presumably, the work that's happening. And there are a couple of questions on the chat. Can you, I've lost my chat now. Where is it?
Yep, that's all right. I can see it.
Yeah. So the first question was from, why has my chat disappeared to? Anyway, perhaps you can see it from, I remember the name Bennett from it because that's my name too.
Good Bennett question.
Thanks.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I see the first one there is, well, there was one from Jake prior to that on planning, which I'll come back to in a second. If I'll start with Chris's on
Chris,
advice, dealing with the situation where local authorities' existing energy supply is not set up to handle sleeving or synthetic power purchase arrangements. That's a very good question, and which is why Bristol City Council is out to tender for a supplier that can handle that at the moment. We're in an unfortunate position where we have a really exciting project and energy suppliers are going pop left, right and centre because of what's happening to current energy pricing. And Bristol City Council used to have their own energy supplier, Bristol Energy. Unfortunately, they no longer have their own energy supplier. And I have to say, had they still had Bristol Energy, I imagine it would be in difficulty, as is some of the others, because of the sheer cost of procuring wholesale energy at the moment. So that is a difficult problem. And if a local authority is in a contract with a supplier, they'll either have to look at amending their existing supply terms or waiting until they're out of their current contract with their supplier to enter into this type of arrangement. Some local authorities purchase their electricity through government procurement sources and organisations such as Laser, who then mean that they're predicated by which suppliers they can use. But Bristol, as I say, is out for procurement right now for a new supplier to deal with this. And we've had quite a few expressions of interest already and entries onto ours. So there are a number of suppliers who are interested in doing this. But at the moment, yeah, there's a lot more pressure on suppliers. So we will, other than sorting out our synthetic power purchase arrangements. So we will see what the response is like for that. And if we don't get a significant response, we're going to have to rethink. But hopefully we will keep seeing those innovators in the supply market, although it will be a bit more difficult for them at the moment. Going back to Jake's question, just tell me to shut up when you want to go into the
No,
break.
just which
Jake was a question about planning and local authorities, and what were they doing to support community generation through planning policy and or net zero targets through planning policy. And that's a really good question, and I think one which local authorities can really engage with. Bristol has a planning policy for net zero, and its new local plans coming out next year with more that will make renewable energy generation more favourable under that policy. But at the moment, the biggest one that they've got is for their district heat network, which requires any new developments within the city centre or the district heat areas to connect to the City Council's district heat network, and that's under planning policy. And that heat network has to be zero carbon by 2030. So the council is putting in a 3 megawatt water source heat pump at the moment, and is delivering quite a lot of heat, and progressing to a zero carbon heat network. So there is some planning policy, but not enough. Absolutely, it's almost despite planning policy that things get through these days.
There's a question from Cara too.
Has there been any conversations yet with Crown Commercial Services? Yes, I think there have, and I think the traditional procurement options for local authorities are now seeing the ability to be able to enter into power purchase arrangements. Of course, you wouldn't have that direct as a local authority. You won't have the direct arrangement with the community energy organisation, so you might miss out on a bit of that social value element, but you would still be able to procure through power purchase arrangements. I know that Laser, another one of the procurement organisations for energy, is definitely doing a synthetic power purchase arrangement, and community energy organisations can bid into that to offer their power, and they have looked at the heads of terms for that to see if they can make that feasible for community energy organisations to bid into. So if you're building a large community site, it would be worth looking at whether you can provide energy into that, through which local authorities can then buy through for their own energy supply. Oh, Jake's put up that community energy report. Brilliant. Thank you, Jake. That's really helpful.
We'll have to incorporate those links into our final summary of this meeting, won't we, Pete? Thanks. There's Richard Sansom's made a comment too, and Cara has an additional question.
So Richard, is the contract term for synthetic power purchase arrangements typically shorter than corporate power purchase arrangements? No, I mean, traditionally they have been slightly shorter due to low energy pricing, but the aim behind doing the synthetic power purchasing arrangements and the sleeve pool with Bristol City Council is to make those long-term contracts 10 years and upwards, in order to see that financial security that community energy organisations will need, but also for the authority to be able to hedge its supply. And in the current market, I can't see a better advertisement for doing this in long-term use. So no, there's no reason at all why they can't be 20 years or more if we can manage to get those through.
Right, I see Paul Fair has his hand up too. We're supposed to be into a coffee break now, but if anyone sneaks out, I've just been brought a coffee, which is very nice. But Sonia's got a lot of information for us all, so I'm very happy to carry on with questions. Paul, do you want to talk to Sonia?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
Just a quick one about City Leap. Are you planning on putting a synthetic PPA into that structure at all to help community projects?
So we have discussed, obviously we're in a live procurement at the moment, so I can't give out too many details, but we have with the sleeve pool and the PPA options we have that I showed on the last slide, we have very much made that a part of the City Leap procurement, and expressed to the bidders who are in there at the moment, that that would be a good way of engaging new community generation, and have set out quite strongly how we see community participation being a part of City Leap. And one of the things that Bristol City Council will still have to procure all of their own energy supply, and that will be done still back through the council, and so they can work in conjunction with City Leap in order to make sure that that is local generation if they want to. So there are a lot of things there which will enable communities to continue to be able to supply.
Thanks. Margaret, you had a question too? Margaret, you're muted, so if you need...
Sorry, just a quick one. I've got to go now. How will we access this recording, please? Because
we will, Pete's not there, we will put it on the website, and there'll be links to it, and you'll be able to access it and download it. And also, I hope we'll have a whole summary of all these useful links we've been given.
And it will be on the WCEN website, yeah?
The Wiltshire Community Energy website.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been really useful.
Yes, people have got a lot of information, haven't they? Sonia, you're phenomenal. I've heard about you and your work with various community energy groups, as well as with Bristol and Devon. We're glad to have you on board.
Thank you.
Our organisation. Does anybody want to take a? Oh, Cara, did you have something else to say? Cara.
Yeah, sorry. Just one last one about opportunities to speed this up and springboard it all. Sonia, are you aware of any work that's going on to engage with the local authorities, the local area energy plans, and the DNOs with community energy?
I think I'm obviously aware of the programs, but I have seen, I suppose, specifically with the authorities that I work closely with, less with Bristol, because although WPD are a partner for both the City Leap project and other work that the council is doing, Bristol is in one of the less constrained areas of our energy network, although it will become constrained if we put in all of the new electric charge points and everything else that are planned. So there are definitely projects to try and do that. But one of the things that I think local authorities should be working to facilitate is where there can be investment in the grid network that the local authorities could potentially assist with, or where they could work in collaboration with developers or community groups to try and alleviate some of that grid congestion, or to look at constraint mapping within areas to try and do a bit more strategic planning across their areas. So it's not something which, funnily enough, comes up on my desk as often as other things do. So I think we do need a bit more work in that, in the local area energy plans, and that collaboration with our network operators as well.
Yeah, yes, you're right. Thank you. Right, we're supposed to be having a coffee break. I don't know if anybody wants to rush out and put the kettle on or anything else, but in a couple of minutes we'll start again to talk about how we are actually working to get local renewed energy supply to householders and businesses through the existing grid, through with Gillian Wright and Pete West himself, who's not there. Thank you, Sonia. Anybody want to take a couple of minutes break? Gillian, we're waiting for Gillian to be ready.
The beauty of Zoom is one can carry one's computer around and have coffee at the same time.
That's exactly right. If you're not sitting on a mainframe like I am, and well, you don't call it mainframe anymore, do you? Yeah, and I saw somebody with a telephone. Now I'm looking for Gillian Wright. Gillian. Are they still recording the silences? Oh, hi, Pete. Got your coffee?
Yeah, got my coffee. I can't go 2.5 hours without a coffee.
Yeah, well, neither can I. I had somebody bring me one, which is very nice.
Good. Sorry,
Yeah. It is important that we get all these links and also the chat dialogue. Can we get those back to everybody?
Save all the chat and put that on the website. Yeah.
Good, excellent. We're looking now for Gillian Wright. So she's
Yeah,
ready.
Gillian's here. Yeah, so again, I'm going to follow Gillian with about 5 minutes of a case study of our energy local Bridport project. So do you want to start in a couple of minutes, Leslie?
Yes, I'm just looking for Gillian. I can't find her.
Oh, yeah, she's there.
Can she hear us? Gillian?
Yeah, she's there. I'll ask her to unmute.
Hi, Pete.
Oh, hi, Gillian.
Hi.
Right.
I went to grab a coffee with the opportunity, sorry.
I know.
I hope you.
Kettle's not as fast as everybody else's, obviously.
That's the last three of us that have got it. So Gillian, you're going to tell us about local supply to householders and businesses through the existing grid.
Yes.
Not the
Right.
Yes, let's hear from you. now.
Is everybody back and ready?
I think so.
Oh, right. Sorry. Do apologize. Let me just.
Is that okay with you, Gillian? I'll follow it 5 minutes at the end with a case study, which images.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh,
we can see our agenda now.
And there you go. There you go. Let me just get this here. Okay. So, morning, everybody. I work for Energy Local, which is a tiny community interest company. We're sort of remotely based, so we don't actually have a hub, but we work all over mainland UK at the moment. Our aim is to try and transform the electricity market so that small scale community energy, renewable energy, has better value for people and the generators. So this is just a little bit about how it works. The aims are to reduce the costs for consumers, help tackle fuel poverty, obviously, help fill the feed-in tariff gap and get a better price for renewables, and also just to make the communities a bit more resilient and stronger by developing some of that buy-in into the generators as well. So the key ingredients for an energy local club is you need a small-ish scale generator. I'll explain a bit more about that after. And everybody needs to be on the same primary substation, and they need to be metered at the same voltage, and everybody needs a smart meter. And I think Sonia alluded to this. We need a licensed supplier, which is where our things get a little bit tricky, particularly at the moment. So everybody has to be on the same supplier, basically, so that they can do that settlement exercise. The clubs we have currently, Bridport, which Pete, Pete obviously has just started in September. We've got the first batch of people on there. Corwin, these three are all in Wales, Corwin, Bethesda and McIntyre. These are all hydro, so quite different energy profiles. And in development, we have PV and an anaerobic digestion site, which will be really interesting as well. So there's two types of clubs. First one works on, everybody's on low voltage. So that can be small businesses and community centres with a low voltage generator. And then when you get to the slightly bigger generators, they generally connect to the grid with a metered at 11, and they have to supply 11. Nothing to do with physics, nothing to do with how the electrons move about. It's just how the electricity industry calculates the line loss factors and bills. So that's all that's about, really. So at the moment, you'll have your generator who's selling. These prices are quite old, sorry, I just realised I should have updated these. They'll be selling on their PPA, and it'll go straight to the grid, and any income from that will just go back to whoever's invested in that generator, whether it's a community owned one or a private farmer or landowner. So there's not really much community benefit. Next door, you've got consumers. I put Mrs. Jones here. It's obviously a lot of clubs in Wales. And they'll be buying exactly that same power for 3, 4, whatever times the price. She's getting no benefit from the turbine. She's probably opposed to it being built in the first place because it's an eyesore and it's not going to benefit her. With Energy Local, what we try and do is we join those generator and Mrs. Jones and our neighbours to form a club. And what that club does is tries to use power at the very time that generator is generating. And if they manage to do that, and there's enough for everybody, instead of Mrs. Jones paying 14 pence or 35 pence as it is now, she'll pay what's called a match price. And that's somewhere between the PPA price and what she would have paid normally. And then also the generator will get that same price. So they'll get more than they would get on their PPA. So it involves everybody being measured every half hour on a smart meter so that that can be balanced. So this is just a summary of what I've said. So say the club agrees a match price of 8, say, just for argument's sake. Instead of Windy Miller, the generator, getting 5 pence, he's now getting 8 pence for every kilowatt hour it generates that's being used in the club. And Mrs. Jones is paying 8 pence rather than 14 pence that she would normally have paid. Obviously, anything that's used out with that, they would get charged a normal price, and Windy Miller would get his normal PPA price as well. So the idea is people start to shift their behaviour and start using power when it's matched to the club. And that just summarises this as well. So basically, if the generator is generating and the users are using at the same time, they should benefit to get cheaper electricity. This obviously changes the benefits. The income to the generator is increased. Hopefully, if it's a locally owned one, there's more money stays locally. They may reinvest in more renewables. It might help a teetering business case, for somebody who's wanting to install renewable energies. It might just help tip it over the edge if they can make sure that this arrangement can happen. For the consumer, obviously, it decreases their energy costs, which is very front of everybody's mind at the moment. For areas with fuel poverty, it can alleviate that, hopefully. Also, it changes behaviours because it makes people aware of what they're using. With the current company we're working with is Octopus. They offer 100% renewables, so people who wouldn't normally take a renewable tariff would kind of by stealth almost end up on a renewable tariff. It obviously supports the local renewables and it engages the community to work together as a cooperative. And so this is just a summary of how it works. Everybody has to be on the same supplier, so both the generator and the consumer have to move their power to whoever the supplier, the licensed supplier is for this club. As I say, at the moment, we're working with Octopus. Everybody has to have half-hourly meter, so the generator would probably have an AMR, the households would have a smart meter. The electricity supplier settles in half-hourly blocks and would calculate the spill for the generator and what's used within the club. So the spill is anything that's not used within the club. The consumer is given a dashboard to help them know when to use the power. So it has little sort of smiley faces at the front that says now's a good time. The generators, it's really windy today. put your washing machine on, this is a good opportunity. And the generator, yeah, and then the supplier obviously will calculate all the billing and do the normal billing and other services that they offer. So they still own the meters, they still do all the remittance, they still do all the settlement and any debt collection. So there's no having to go and knock on Mrs. Jones' door and tell her she's not paid her bill by the local landlord or whoever it is that's involved in the club. So each person in the club has a dashboard, which I can show you. And this basically shows how much the generator is generating. And it also shows collectively as a club how much everybody's using. So it gives you an idea of if there's extra energy available, and if there's not, so it's not a good time to use power. The best time is always when the generation is available. That's always the cheapest. So I'm just going to show you, this is about work in progress at the moment. So Bridport's just a very new club. So this is the dashboard for them. So you can see these little bars here. This is the consumption by the club. And the different colours indicate the different times of day. So not only are they encouraged to use when the generator is generating, but they're also encouraged to shift away from peak times as well. So you can see down at the bottom, this is the price they get charged if the generator is not generating at the different times of day. So peak is always 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, so that's the highest price. And then the blue bit here is when the wind is generating. So you can see on the 17th of October there was more wind than the club were needed at that point. So if you were up at that time in the night, you could turn things on, or if you had something that could schedule things, you could obviously turn that on as well. So this is a tool. So there's also a replica of this which shows individually. So it shows your own consumption as well. So you can actually go on and get to learn about how and when you use power and sort of drill down. Not everybody does that, but even some people do. So as I say, the graph shows the time of day for the match, the wind's the coloured blocks, different times throughout the day for different prices, and every block is a half hour. On our website, there's some other dashboards for the 3 hydro projects as well. There's one just that needs to be launched still, but you can have a look at them. They have quite a different profile because they're hydro and it's kind of wet at this time of year, so you can see how different they are. How this kind of works for each individual very much depends on them. You know, I think with everything to do with energy, you can throw as much technology and information at people, but you know, it depends how much people are engaged to actually how much they benefit. Somebody could just sign up to the club and they would still benefit. They won't benefit as much as somebody who goes to look at the dashboard and actually thinks about, you know, changing, you know, when they might put their washing machine or their dishwasher on, or you know, if they have, you know, a high level, you know, charging device like a car or something like that, then obviously, as somebody said earlier, this actually helps them decide when is a good time to use that. So it can help switch behavior, but like I say, you can, as an old colleague of mine always said, you can build an A-rated building but have G-rated occupants. So you know, you can give people as many tools as you want. At the end of the day, it's up to them. But we also have a few sort of Internet of Things devices that we're trialing. So things like smart plugs, which align with the dashboard, so that if you wanted to charge something, it can actually pick the best time of day to do that for you. So, and also things to do with heat, similar with heat pumps and EV chargers. So we're working on sort of innovative programs with that. So yeah, so also we hope that the dashboard sustains behavior change and that people just don't look at it and then ignore it. And then the other level of engagement, which is quite an important one, is also each club is set up as a co-op, and people can become committee members or volunteer to help the keep the club going. So how we set it up in the first place, we have to model certain elements to make sure that we're managing expectations of club members, because we don't want to oversubscribe and have too many people and nobody benefits. Likewise, we need to have enough people that the generator, it's worth it for the generator. So what we do is we look at the club area, as I mentioned earlier. It's fundamentally based on a primary substation. So we'll go on the district network maps and look where the substation goes. And then we'll look at how much generation is available. And then we'll match that to sort of average number of houses, or it could be some businesses in there as well, depending on what you're targeting. And then we'll play around with that to look at what's the best match price and how many houses or consumers fit into that. And then from that we'll target and do outreach work to engage with people. So this is a summary of how the results of that basically, as I say, the prices are old, but you can see we've looked at different generation sizes, different number of houses, and different match prices to see how it balances with the savings for people. We tend to look for 20% saving for householders. Obviously, as prices have changed recently, that's sort of shifted a bit. And then we also try and get the similar increase in benefit for the generator. Quite often, if the generator is community owned, they're not so interested in increasing their income. They're more interested in getting something for the consumers, and that's down to each club to have a sort of conversation and strategy on that. We excuse me, we have club advisors. These are people that have local knowledge, excuse me a second, of the area, so that they know the community and they know how to outreach and they're trusted. We train them, and they sort of do the communications plans and to get engagement and to set up the club. We have an online portal which is secure, so people can express an interest and we can gauge the size and the number of people that are getting interested. I think Bridport hit their target in, was it 4 days or something, Pete? It was incredible. So we basically give them all the tools they need to recruit members and also set up the club, which is effectively a co-op of the members. And so our role is we advise the advisor training. We provide all the equipment, as I've just mentioned, the toolkit and the portal. We do all the back office admin to work with the licensed supplier. We develop relationships with suppliers. We arrange the tariffs. We also provide sponsorship for the constitution. So instead of spending several £1,000s getting the FCA to approve it, they've already approved ours. So you can just change your names and dates. And also we provide the dashboard as well. As I say, each club's a co-op. So the co-op agrees the match prices annually, or if the PPA changes, actually, which is what we experienced recently, obviously. The co-op has board members, and it can also have volunteers, and the board members must include the generator and the consumers, just so that it's fair. And the idea is that it's self-sustaining. So sorry, that was a very quick whiz through. So these are sort of the things that we see as the benefits to Energy Local, which I'm sure as energy professionals you all know about the benefits of community energy and sharing the benefits. And here are my details if you want to get in touch.
Thank you, Gillian. That's hugely interesting, and we're glad we'd get help from you. Peter, you're going to talk us about an actual case study of it in practice, and then we can talk about the questions. Pete, I can't hear you. No. Still can't hear you, Pete.
Okay, sorry, I'll just set up my own screen sharing here. Let's have a look. Yeah, this is a quick 5-minute case study. Let's have a look. Can you see that?
No.
Nope.
No. Oh, hang on. Sorry.
Share screen.
Hang on. was me organising it. And
While you're working that out, I've got an immediate question. Is it the right time to get a smart meter from whoever is supplying your electricity, or are they going to advance? Should you wait till you've got to that stage to get? This is what the moment you're ready, Pete, I'll stop. But I just want to ask Gillian or anybody.
You mean in general, or for somebody joining the energy local?
I meant in general.
I don't know. I've got one. I quite like it. Yeah. I don't know. The government targets, they want us to have them. So if you can
get them now.
Yeah. I don't think it won't make any difference to your life unless you can get on one of the smarter tariffs.
Okay.
Or if you've got an electric vehicle or something like that, you definitely want to get one, because you can get more agile tariffs.
Right. But thank you for that. Pete's going to tell us about the case study, Dorset.
Okay, now you can see my screen.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, basically, Dorset Community Energy is a pretty standard community benefit society, mainly installing PV on schools. I think we're very similar to Devon, Sonia. We've got about 25 PV sites since 2015. But what we were looking for is something which was a bit more innovative, or something which a bit more of a future. And we had a discussion with Energy Local in 2019, and in January had some training from Energy Local at the end of 2019, and then we launched Energy Local Bridport in January 2020. It was based on selling export from an existing 50 kilowatt wind turbine owned by a local farmer who, as Gillian said, is only getting 5 pence, and he was interested in, helping the community as well as getting a better income. So it was going great guns. We had a couple of street stalls. That's the chair of the Bridport Town Council was very supportive. And we basically agreed this match price through Energy Local with Octopus, and it was around about 9.5p. And this is at the time of use tariff, also agreed with Octopus, which is very important because also the participants, the householders, would benefit from an overnight tariff as well. And we have to set the time of use tariff, we have to set the match price, 9.5p from the wind turbine, slightly lower than the nighttime price as well, so that it's quite clear if the wind is generating at night, it's supplied to the householders from the wind. This is the geographic area of the substation, which is quite useful because the wind turbine itself was right to the north here. It had been a few hundred meters further north, it wouldn't have been connected to the Bridport substation. So we recruited householders within this geographical area. And as Gillian said, we were expecting it to take some time. We were looking for 50 to 60 householders to match the generation from the wind. We had 90 householders sign up or express interest within the first month, within January. That was January 2020. February 2020, COVID struck. And basically, the participating householders had to have smart meters, and Octopus were quite rightly, very reluctant to install smart meters, or even prohibited for quite a few months. But I think my opinion was the biggest challenge is the metering and the billing. You can imagine the complexity of actually having to, for Octopus to develop the algorithms to basically measure the wind generation in half-hour blocks, manage the consumers as a group in a half-hour block, accumulating all the data from their smart meters together and then offsetting one against the other. And then there was a question earlier, what happens then if the consumers are not taking all the wind energy, for example, like at night? Well, then the generator gets paid a standard PPA price from Octopus, a standard export price. So it's complex, but the attraction for me is that once it's set up, it's self-sustaining really. Octopus do the metering, the billing, and what's in it for them is to supply the rest of the power when there's no local renewable generation. So it's equivalent to having PV on your own home. Electricity supply companies are still interested in supplying you with the rest of the power when your PV is not generating. So yeah, we registered as a cooperative. Obviously, we're quite familiar with the FCA, but we did use the Energy Local rules, the registered rules, which was really great. It saves a lot of hassle as well. And final slide is we're looking for a new opportunity. The wind is fine. We've got enough members. We've started supplying a pilot group of 14 householders about a month ago. So we're actually live, which I'm really pleased about. It's taken nearly 2 years. And we've got another 12 householders that have switched to Octopus and they've got smart meters and they're ready to be added. There's still a few glitches with the metering and the billing, but as soon as it's sorted, we will add the next batch of 12, and really then we will then open it up to the full 50 or 60. Once it's working in practice for that number of people, and people can talk to their neighbours and they can be confident that the time of use tariff, the local supply tariff, is working, we think there's a really good opportunity to add maybe 250 kilowatts of ground-mounted PV. As Gillian said, the voltage connected to the grid has to be low voltage, 440 volts, which limits it to about 250 kilowatts, any one installation. The challenge will be, though, for householders supplied by PV, the standard sort of, what would you say, the base load of a house during daytime electricity is only about 300 or 400 watts at the most. But by having it spread between other householders in the same group, obviously if someone got an immersion heater on or a kettle or something using a high amount of power, it tends to average out. But we would still, for 250 kilowatts of PV, we would need 300 householders. So we're also looking at businesses, including the town council, with daytime electricity use. That would be really, really simple to supply local businesses, or even perhaps a mixture of householders and businesses. And what's quite taken me by surprise is we've had an RCEF phase 1 feasibility study by Public Power Solutions. I think there's Roger Sampson from Public Power Solutions is participating in this meeting. The phase 1 feasibility study gave costings and basically a bit of a financial model, and it showed something like a 15% IRR. We ran it through our own financial model, which we've used for PV, on rooftop PV, and without a subsidy, it's cash positive every year, selling at 9.5p to householders. If we actually did increase that a little bit, either you can have a much larger community benefit fund, or basically the economics stack up without any grant at all, once we've got the planning application. So we do need to apply to RCF for stage 2 funding bid for planning for the PV, because we can't, as a community benefit society, we can't take any at-risk costs with our members' shareholdings. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you very much. That's very impressive that it should happen. And it really is happening. There are a number of questions. Perhaps, Gillian, could you address the question to us? Richard Sandston and Jacob got a question that they think is...
Yeah, there's quite a few. I do have to go at noon, so I'll be very quick. I do apologise. Yeah. For Cara, the AD plan, I think, is 200 and it's electricity. Of the clubs on our website, there's 5 that are live at the moment. They're all getting a better tariff via Octopus. Ofgem don't favour our clubs. I think Elexon, we've had agreement from Elexon that we can use this model, and BAYS are funding a lot of us. So I think they do want from a higher level, and Ofgem, I think the innovation is needed and wanted. So it's being tested. How does the extra electricity rate outside of generating hours compare to typical market rate? Funnily enough, at the moment it's much cheaper, but normally at the peak times would be a little bit higher than what you would normally get, because most people traditionally are on a flat rate for their tariff. There's a question about our smart appliances being encouraged. Yes, as I said, we're trialing some Internet of Things with smart plugs and relays for washing machines, dishwashers, heating, smart air pumps and EV. Customers do lock in, Octopus lock in customers for 12 months at the start of that extra tariff that they link to. They have said that they're not going to put them up at the moment. They are created for Energy Local. They're very bespoke. And so I think it's quite a lot of work for them to create them. So they have kept them for now. but obviously that will change with time. Any supply cost, the match power? No, the match power is the price, because it's unregulated power. There doesn't need to be any extra costs. That's from Jake, sorry. Cara, could the supply company be changed? Technically, yes. I wouldn't like to see, I think it could be messy though, actually. Have you got Octopus yet? I just answered that.
Are you all following the questions in the
yes, I'm reading.
sorry,
Yeah,
I can see you're following. I just wonder if everybody else is following the questions.
All right, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. So it's Octopus to stick to these prices, or have they gone up?
No, they've stuck to the prices. So these time of use prices are set bespoke to Energy Local. So they're sticking to them. They've agreed that they'll stick to them for now. So that they have revised them once in 2 years. With energy club arrangements, half-hourly meterings, what is the risk exposure to consumers who have to buy in excess demand above the club supply? That's part of the modelling exercise we do at the start. So if somebody is, we look at a normal house, it is done on a normal household, and even if there was no renewable energy available. So say the Bridport turbine was down for a couple of months, so say it was down, they would still not lose out. So particularly at the moment, the time of use tariffs are quite a lot lower than what the market offering is anyway, just because of the current situation.
If I could add a word there, Gillian, as well.
Yeah.
Very positive thing why I'm fairly committed to Energy Local Bridport is that Octopus have guaranteed this tariff for a year for the first people that have joined. But any householder can leave. Just, you've got the legal right to switch supplier. I wouldn't get involved with this if people were actually tied in to something where they couldn't get out of it. But basically, they could leave, at a week's notice. It's quite nice. It's a bit of a market-based cooperative approach, I would say. The Octopus have to keep the rest of the tariff competitive, otherwise people will leave.
Yeah,
quite complicated, but people can leave if they wish to. But Octopus,
Octopus don't object.
People don't leave. Okay.
Yeah, Octopus don't object to anybody leaving the company, and even if they wanted to switch to another tariff within Octopus, they could do that.
Yeah. Okay. I can see Keith's comment. Very well done, Pete, in getting the Bridgeport Club live, one of only 5 of 20 energy local clubs. I reckon your attention to detail was key. And also, I should think your help from Gillian Wright and Energy Local. You're good. If any of us want to get it up, that's the way to do it, isn't it? Go through.
You have to, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want to keep saying you have to.
Speaking of Octopus, I have a project meeting with them now, so sorry to be so rushed, but thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, but we all know where to get hold of you if we need you now.
Yes.
Before you go, and while you're having a conversation with Octopus, I just wonder what opportunity there is for people with solar that might have some surplus. We could also look at doing a similar club where people could buy that locally.
Octopus can't do that at the moment. However, they do offer a SEG, obviously. I think you probably know that, the smart, what's it, energy guarantee. So they do offer that. If it's on Agile, I hear it's very good. I'm going to caveat that with lots of, I don't give energy procurement advice. But yeah, I hear that's very high at the moment, like eye-wateringly high. So yeah, but we can't do that with them at the moment. It's just too complicated. We can only just do one generator at the moment. So.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye. We've got one more presentation before we talk about the future of Wessex Community Energy, and that is from Ben Eilot. If I said that right, the Carbon Co-op.
Yeah.
Are you ready, Ben?
Yeah. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'll show my screen.
The Carbon Co-op.
Oak, can you see my presentation?
Yes, perfectly.
Great. So yeah, I'm Ben Aylott. I'm a senior energy systems engineer and the program coordinator for energy systems here at Carbon Co-op. We are a energy services cooperative based in Manchester. Not from the southwest. However, I personally was born and bred in Dorchester, Dorset, and my father is from Burton Bradstock. So it's been really interesting to hear about all the stuff going on down in Dorset and in Bridport in particular. So what I'm going to talk about today, what I've agreed with Pete, is how can community energy groups get involved in flexibility. I'm aware that there's also a lot of municipal authorities, councils on as well, and I think this is also relevant to you where you're trying to make flexibility happen in homes and small businesses, all still very relevant. So what I'm going to talk about is, I'll just give you a brief introduction to Carbon Co-op and our Power Shaper service, which is our banner for our flexibility work, and an overview of flexibility, where it's at the moment from a community energy perspective. And then I'll give you some results from our trials, our work on flexibility, and our learnings from this, which I think will be interesting to you and might find useful if you're thinking about doing this sort of thing. So who's Carbon Co-op? Carbon Co-op is non-profit energy services and advocacy cooperative based in Manchester. We're not a normal energy cooperative, so we're not involved in generation. We've never been involved in generation or generation models. We started off doing energy efficiency and retrofit, and we're still doing that. And we're also a membership organisation. We have over 350 primarily householder members, as well as a lot of staff now. So we have 21 people on staff working across 3 different areas. So retrofit, which is what we started doing, energy systems, which is my area, and that's the part of the business that I head up. And then we also have a group who does work on equal energy communities, which is engagement and policy work. So zooming in on energy systems, which is the area of work which flexibility comes under. I mean, our work in this area is broadly split between consumer services that we provide to individuals, which sometimes involves them paying us money, but usually still is to do with services provided under grant-funded projects. The projects themselves, and our current projects are Rescue VPP, which is a Horizon 2020 R&D project, the Greater Manchester Local Energy Market project, which we're a participant, and we also have a heat pump project in the area, an R&D heat pump project, which has been funded by MCS and West, who are our local DNO. As you might imagine, this all involves having quite a lot of technical expertise, and we do also do a lot of consulting. So we have a lot of expertise in energy and environmental data, making software, particularly in IoT and data areas. We've also done a lot of community energy system modeling. So what that means is we're often contributing to feasibility studies for new developments where they want to install a sort of community-wide energy system, maybe a sort of private wire network where they want to have a battery and solar panels on the roofs and share the energy sort of thing. So we've contributed to that area. And we're also quite involved in written a lot of reports for local, regional and national energy policy and regulation, including reports in what area I'm talking about today, flexibility. So just very quickly, what is flexibility? It's a bit of a jargon term commonly used now, but for me, it means something very specific, which is it's the commoditized ability to reduce or increase the usually electrical demand from the perspective of those who run the system. So what traditionally it meant was that at specific times, very large generators or consumers of power would be paid to adjust their generation or consumption of electricity. And but this is increasingly something that it's becoming viable for smaller consumers and generators of power embedded within the distribution networks to do. And in essence, it's getting paid to turn things on and off, essentially. On the right, there's a sort of depiction of what this can mean from the perspective of the operator. What we're really talking about here is things like the graph labeled B, load shifting, or C, load shedding. So flexibility doesn't normally mean energy efficiency measures where you're reducing the overall power usage. And it also doesn't necessarily relate to changes in operation of, say, a generator, which are part of normal operations. Really that dynamic adjustment of demand and generation and creating value from that, being able to sell that to other people. So why is it important? So the basic argument is simple. It's not that we need flexibility to run the electricity system or even transition to a low carbon system. It's that we use flexibility, then it will make doing this a lot cheaper. So it's really mainly an economic argument. The alternative is building loads of generation and storage, which will be quite expensive. So the main idea here is making that transition to a low carbon system a lot cheaper. How much cheaper? Reports have suggested, between 10 to 40 billion, depending on the sort of scenario pathway that's followed. So significant amounts of money. And ultimately, this is a saving for consumers. They're the ones who have to pay for the system, whether it's through their bills or through taxes. So I think it's important that that message is clear. If you want to think about it in a slightly different way, I mean, a lot of you will be familiar with electric vehicles and heat pumps, these sorts of things. It's pretty obvious if you think about your electric vehicle and your heat pump that these are devices that can dynamically alter their consumption of power. So in various different ways. And there's a lot of potential and scope there to shift around when and how they use electricity for the benefit of the system and the consumers. This is a bit of a complicated diagram, but I think it makes it a bit more explicit, a bit more detail on what is the value of flex and who is it valuable to. So this is stolen from a framework for describing these things called USEF. And there are a lot of actors in the system, DNOs, national grids, suppliers, which are here labeled as VRP, who potentially could benefit or would be interested in purchasing flexibility. And I have to say at the moment, a lot of this is largely unrealized, particularly for small scale flexibility. So controlling things in people's homes. It's not the case at the moment that consumers can, if they have a battery or an EV, that they can participate in all these different possible value streams. They can only participate in a very limited number of them. So a lot of this story, this narrative around flexibility is about unlocking all this value and enabling consumers to realize it and benefit from it. So if you wanted to sell flexibility, how would you do it at the moment? You're very fortunate in the Southwest because you could say the Southwest is sort of the home of local and regional flexibility because Western Power Distribution, one of your two local DNOs, they've really led the way in starting to set up local and regional flexibility schemes. And they've now got this umbrella under which several of the DNOs in the UK are operating under called Flexible Power, which acts as a sort of platform for enabling local and regional flexibility, which you can plug into. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, I'd strongly encourage you to go and have a look at what WPD have about their own schemes on their website, and this will give you a flavour of how these schemes operate. it can be quite technical and complicated, and an organisation called PICLO, which if you've been in the local energy space, many of you will be familiar with, they have now sort of pivoted into sort of providing a much nicer, friendlier way to engage in these flexibility schemes, a more standardised way. And they can also give you a view, an insight into this world of participating into local and regional flexibility, including helping you to apply to these schemes. So that's another place you can go to if you're interested in
We've lost you.
Other thing I'd say here is that really for small scale stuff, which is what we're primarily interested in unlocking with our work. Again, just like Energy Local was saying beforehand, you really need smart meters and new internet-based IoT systems for all. So what are we doing on this? It's pretty hard for us to sort of figure out how we were going to get engaged in this area, and the story of how we did is quite long and don't have time for it today. It's quite an interesting one, but where we are today is that we've launched this all-encompassing consumer-facing service, which acts as a sort of umbrella for our domestic flexibility work. So it acts as a way in which consumers and our members can participate in our flexibility schemes. And it's online. You can go and have a look at it. It's called Power Shaper, and it's very much targeted at homeowners who may have these assets that are needed as control, such as EVs, heat pumps, smart appliances, water tanks. And when we set it up initially, we were really targeting those DNO flexibility schemes I've just been talking about. So a lot of our work to date has been on exploring how we can engage our domestic members, customers into a portfolio that we can sell to DNOs in different parts of the country. But since we started, we realized, to make this stuff work, we really need to stack it with other things. So we're in the process now of adding support for things like time of use tariffs, which currently are maybe not very popular, but we expect that to go back to something more normal in the near future. And also things like community balancing and virtual metering, which has some relation to the Energy Local schemes, although it's not directly comparable. And we're also looking to access some of those national flexibility schemes and markets, which in the future, which are currently sort of inaccessible to these sort of small scale flexibility, which we find in homes for a variety of sort of regulatory and legal reasons. And but we're hoping this is in the process of changing. These are being reformed, so we're expecting access to these to hopefully we can in them as well. I won't talk. This is quite detailed about how the system works. I think I'll probably skip over that. Basically, we have now an end-to-end system for enabling flexibility in homes. So we've developed and are providing the entire system. So you could come to us if you wanted a system to enable flexibility in people's homes, and it has all the elements, the logical components that you need to make this happen. It has the management system in the homes that connects to the things like EV chargers and heating. It has the back end in the cloud, which communicates with the management system, sends it information about the demand side response events that are happening. And then we also have that link with the UK smart metering system, which enables us to verify that we have provided the flexibility we've said we've provided to our purchasers of it. So we've been doing this for a while now. We've been doing it for a few years. We had a big project which ended in the last couple of months called OpenDSR. This was a BEIS-funded project. This pretty much funded the development and the trial first trial of this Power Shaper service, it demonstrator activity took place during the pandemic, which was very challenging, but we did manage to do it between July 2020 and April 2021, and we were able to run a set of simulated DSR events, which were very closely modelled on actual DNO flex requirements. So we actually based our events largely on the public information provided by Western Power Distribution about what had been happening in their schemes, just so we could make it as realistic as possible. And as you can imagine, this involves lots of hands-on activity. So we were installing things, we were fixing things, we were supporting people on the telephone, operating the system. There's huge amounts of work involved, lots of people involved. At the end of it, where we got to is we got some really great data on the scheme and what happened. And I can only give you a flavour of that now. It can get a bit complicated. What this graph shows is the average flexibility in kilowatt hours across our portfolio of users per event. So the events happened in a sort of chronological order at different times over the winter last year. And this shows the sort of distribution, the averages of the response that we were able to achieve. And then what you can see in this graph is that a lot of these are sort of hovering just above zero, but they're sort of skewed distributions, so they skew upwards positively. So it's a bit of a mixed result for us. So it's clear that, you know, some people are contributing flexibility who are participating in the scheme and some are not. But generally, we had some more negative people sort of dragging the averages down. So looking at it in terms of participants, is sort of indeed what happened. So most participants contributed positive amounts of flexibility when averaged across events. We just had a sort of a hardcore of users on the left who weren't contributing positively to our portfolio. So, you know, ideally what we want to see from this is that negative group over there being squeezed out, if you like, and the positive group on the other side getting bigger and contributing more power. In terms of what numbers we'd want to achieve here, just as a baseline, I think we'd be looking to get sort of 1 kilowatt hour per hour minimum out of our sort of cohort. But of course, that depends a lot on how people are using appliances and what types of appliances they are. But 1 kilowatt hour per hour, which corresponds to a reduction of 1 kilowatt over an hour averaged across the portfolio, is a reasonable baseline benchmark to be targeting. So we're not quite there yet, and there's a lot of reasons that we do generally understand why that isn't the case, and we'll be looking to improve on that now in the next trial. I did want to make one point, which you will no doubt come across in if you try and engage in this area. There is a big overriding issue in this whole area, which is we're also trying to address in our work with government on regulation and policy, which is that there's a huge barrier to doing a lot of this stuff, which is interoperability. So people can have batteries, EV chargers and heat pumps in their homes, but in most cases still, we can't talk to them and we can't integrate them. And particularly with things like batteries, this is pretty offensive in a lot of ways, because there's no other purpose for those things being in the home apart from being able to control them for these sorts of things. So if they're totally locked down and you can't use them for these purposes, then what's the point in doing it? It's a bit different with EVs and heat pumps because they serve other purposes, but batteries is a particularly bad situation. So this is a real big barrier that still needs to be dealt with, I think, and I think it's the biggest remaining barrier. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have also said the smart meters, but we're now consistently getting smart meter data through into our system to enable these services. So finally then, how can community or councils, where relevant, get involved in Flex? So I think it's important to say that Flex on its own doesn't work. I mean, we've always been fairly clear on this, but our experience in the last few years has definitely confirmed this. You need to be doing other things as well. And that can be a lot of different things. It's not. You do need a lot of technical expertise and capacity, and this is relative really to say the generation schemes we've been hearing about. This isn't stuff that can be done by volunteers. So you do need to build organizations like our organization with engineers on staff, with business people on staff who can set up these services and run them. And that's partly because there is this different relationship with customers. It's sort of this going relationship. So, you know, it's like we're hearing about with Energy Local, those metering, complexity around the metering, operating those schemes. That's something Octopus in that case is providing, but their role is really important in making that happen. It's the same with this sort of thing. But there is huge potential here, and it's easy to be cynical about this stuff, but there's loads of unexplored, unrealized value in this area, and there's loads of value also in the overlap between this sort of work and other stuff that we should be doing in people's homes, like retrofit and smart home services. There's lots of different ways you can pursue this still, even though it's not quite there in terms of being market viable yet. And I'll leave this here for any of those of you who are interested find out more. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ben. There's a couple of questions that are emerging. I don't know if you've seen them on the chat.
We'll have
Sonia,
a look.
Cara had one, and John's got another. Yeah.
So starting with Cara. Could PowerShaper be used by LAs to monitor their estate's energy usage? So I didn't get into it in the talk, but we've actually spun out the smart meter connection integration from our service into a separate service now. At the moment, it's just a consumer service. So people just pay us to gain access to their smart meter data and get insights from it, independent of their supplier. But we are looking at potentially providing this to communities, local authorities, social housing providers, so that you could potentially use it to monitor energy usage across an estate. Could the PV generation be included? So for a very limited number of users,
excuse me, could you just stop sharing your screen so we can see you more?
Oh yeah.
Yes, thanks. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yes.
But for PV generation, for a very limited number of users, our users at the moment, we are getting their export data from their smart meters, but this is not quite the same as the generation data. So given how the solar generation stuff works at the moment, it's unlikely that we will get generation data through the smart metering system for quite a few years. But we will increasingly get export data, which is useful still. So yeah, there's that possibility with that stuff, but it's a bit shaky at the moment. That.
Yes, John's asked about grants.
Grants. So actually, I mean, you would have seen the announcements yesterday as part of the net zero strategy. There was a lot of funding announced in various areas which could fund activity in flexibility. So I would definitely take a look at funding that's available in the net zero innovation portfolio. You've also got the NIA. You've also got the sort of Ofgem administered network innovation funds, and there's increasing opportunities to partner up with DNOs and get funding in these sorts of areas. And you would have seen in my slide that we're starting to get funding now directly from DNOs as well, although under a community fund banner. So there's a lot of potential funding in this area, and obviously there's a strong narrative at the moment around the transition. So the money is out there. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Good. Thank you. Is there any more questions or comments from anybody? No, thank you very much, Ben, for that. I mean, it's just amazing how much I've learned this morning from listening to these various presentations. As things go on and on. Privately, I'm going to go and get my own smart meter now and make sure that I plug my electric car in only at night, but that's just me. But thank you for doing that. Thank you for making this presentation. Thank you to everybody who's come. We now should go on to talk about the future, which Wessex Community Energy Network meeting.